Hello, everyone. This is Gary Reiner from Heart to Heart with Gary Reiner. I am here with Neil McGovern, who is running for town board in the town of Lake Pleasant. How you doing, Neil?
Well, Gary, good seeing you again.
It's good seeing you again. Yes, you were my very first interview
I remember
that
that.
I ever did for Heart to Heart with Gary Reinhardt, and that's full circle.
Yeah?
We finally come back around. Of course, you're running in the political arena again. You were formerly mayor. You were also formerly town supervisor.
That's right.
So this is not super new to you.
No, it's not unusual for us to talk about policies and directions for our town or village.
Excellent. All right. So first up, what is your platform that you are running on for town
Well,
board?
to put it simply, my reason for running is that two experienced town board members were retiring out, and I had some concerns that sort of experience, that sort of institutional knowledge, would be lost to the community. I had some personal reasons and family health matters that basically took me out of this arena. Didn't think I'd ever really return, but I saw an opportunity to share some of my experiences and work with our town board again in an old new role. But as far as platform, uh, I do think we need a new direction. I do think that the climate here for growth has sort of slowed. Uh, I don't know that it's intentional by folks as much as it is fear of the unknown. But regardless, I do have some policies I'd like to see put in place. I'm confident that with some new board direction, we can make those policies happen.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Bob Peck and Mike O'Connor are leaving, or not leaving, but they
Yeah,
are filling out the. I mean, it's not like I'm gone.
they're not rerunning.
No,
So
they're not rerunning. They are finishing out their term, and then we have three potential candidates, you being one of them. One subject that I haven't heard lately in the town board arena, and haven't heard what's going on with any of it, is the street lights. Now, how do you feel about the street lights in Lake Pleasant?
well, I've fought for many years for our citizens' requests to increase street lighting throughout, again, the village and then subsequently the town. Uh, those boards did not take those increases lightly, being that each and every street light adds a incremental increase to their bill to us, National Grids. However, neither National Grid or those two municipalities would have put streetlights in any of those locations if it were not truly needed. So I find it hard to imagine that we can sort of unilaterally turn many of those off. The cost savings is fairly modest, but more importantly, you're talking about safety, security, just the general welfare of the community. Streetlights are an important thing, and I think even beyond what they do in real time, they are a message. Turning off streetlights, becoming a darker, less welcoming community. Those of us who drive at night a lot in our county and in our region, we look forward to those little oases where it's easier to drive, it's easier to walk, or in some cases for folks to bike and maybe even be pushing a baby carriage to get home. There's so many reasons that light equals security. I think it sends a bad message that we're a lesser welcoming and a lesser safe area. So I'm wholly for keeping every single street light we have.
Yeah, for me, I think a big one is deer. Without the lights to kind of show that there are deer on the side of the road, and I know, like, even from Ohio to Morehouse, Pasico area, that's a very dark stretch,
No
and
question.
it's kind of frightening.
Sure. I mean, I understand that those who are proposing these things aren't talking about turning them off on my Route 30 Main Street location where the sidewalks are, but nevertheless, are the people who live in the outer reaches, in the more, say, rural parts of our town, are they not entitled to the same kind of securities on South Shore Road or Fish Mountain Road or, Tamarack, wherever you speak of? Um, each one of those streetlights in the 40 years that I've been around here that were added for a really solid reason, and I can't see getting rid of them.
Now, something that has to do with the lights as well is the LED. Now, we had somebody from New York State come in, they did like a whole presentation, and then it kind of dropped off. I haven't heard anything about the LED lights, nothing's been brought up about them.
Right. It seems to have been tabled a number of times, but that's a misnomer. This was not someone from the state directly who was proposing this. This is a company who is a mid contractor for putting these in. Now, uh, the at least the initial blush of this over a year ago was that there would be tremendous savings. Um, I don't think that the town board currently, and I would throw in the village board as well because they've been approached as well. I don't think that they have been sufficiently informed as to the cost and how long the payback is. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Where you lay out funds and hope for a much lesser electric bill from National Grid. Uh, I'm certainly a little bit, no pun intended, in the dark here about this matter because it has been tabled and sort of set aside a number of times. Um, One of the questions that I raised early on at one of the town board meetings was currently we are billed by each pole, each light doesn't have a separate bill, but the aggregate of how many poles you have in your municipality is how you bill. There's no meters on each one, if you know what I mean. It's not like your house. So um, until you really see what National Grid is proposing, lowering your per pole estimate, I'm not sure that you can count on savings. So it's an issue that I think still needs to have some light shed on it.
Again, always good with the puns. I can always count on you for that. Now, one of the most controversial things that has happened this year and even last summer is the golf course road public beach, or the golf course right away, or whatever you call it.
Right.
That has been a big controversy. It's been very contentious. What is your opinion on the matter?
Well, right of ways in general are a difficult, convoluted mess, quite frankly. Um, Having the municipality involved, I mean, I have numerous stories, including one that was my own, about right of ways on private property, taxed, assessed property. Um, Sure, folks need to be able to get onto the lake. Others need to be able to control the properties that they hold title to. But when you involve the municipality, it does get sketchy. Now, I don't think that there's been any, even any allusion to the word town beach, but it is a right of way. It apparently is sort of two in one, bifurcated by an imaginary line of folks who have deeded right of ways from houses that can be, in some cases, well over a mile away, and then another half of which is purportedly the towns to do with as it wishes. Um, I've heard the arguments at numerous town board meetings. It gets into some real weeds as far as legalities. I know the town board has sort of slowed down this discussion a number of times in order to either check with their counsel, legal counsel, more recently the setting of a high water mark. If you can't actually call or set a high water mark on a piece of property that borders lakefront, it sometimes is difficult to even begin the conversation. So I see some taxpayers who feel that they will be hurt by this, and others who I think the number of folks is fairly small, but others, town residents, who have over the years, maybe even more in winter than in summer, have used the access of what is a town property or holding to get out onto the ice, in some cases for ice fishing, etc. Since we're still in the middle of it as far as the high water mark at all, I'd be reluctant to say what I know, think of it, just because the legal things don't seem to have been completely untangled. Going forward, what you take away from these things is that right-of-ways are something that the municipalities should stay clear of, in my estimation. You either own a piece of property and manage it, actively manage it, or stay away from them.
Yeah, I know when they got the abstract to come in, and he said that this is the most confusing thing he's ever seen. And even in my personal research, as my house was part of the original thing, and just trying to untangle that myself is so confusing.
Sure.
It's just not worth it, pretty much.
Well, some of these things, if they date back to 100 and plus or minus those years back, 80 years back, there was maybe not as much attention to detail on the specifics of either the property lines or sometimes the uses. I've been told by others anecdotally that reasons for having, say, the Osborne family or the previous owners of the golf course, etc., giving these right-of-ways or, in fact, selling them if they might have to real estate folks. But for the municipality's use, I think one of the logical uses was to draw water. Fire protection's a difficult thing, particularly in the town where there are no municipal water or hydrants. So it doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility that was one of the reasons given. So there's no nefarious motives for folks having put this parcel on this trajectory. It's just now it seems to come to light more because of personal properties, debris, and so on being left there, the adjacent property owner leaving and perhaps looking to sell the property and then subsequently selling it. Now new owners want clarity, what they can do and what they can acquire and where they can put septic. So these things have to be cleared up, but it does, I think it stands as a warning. These sort of nebulous deals when it comes to municipalities, you want to stay clear of them. I myself, as supervisor, worked on a matter that was not quite as thorny as this, but one that we were able to rid the town of a piece of property that was really more obligation than it was useful in the way of insurance liability, etc., and came to a what turned out to be a good outcome, selling that through the usual channels, which are not easy to rid ourselves of a piece of property, but Ken Kurt and some of the folks who used a parcel they had that was adjacent, now they've been able to commingle those. Somewhere down the road, a solution will be had. Sometimes the solution is not completely satisfactory to everyone, but we need to rid ourselves of some of these entanglements.
All right. Well, one thing I've seen especially with this controversy, is that there have been a lot more people coming to the town board meetings. What is your feeling of the increased public involvement in town board meetings as
I'm
opposed to like the past?
I'm absolutely for it. Uh, Not only because more people at these meetings, all due respect to the great efforts that you and the board have taken up in the way of uh, the, uh, the the podcast or telecasts, the recordings of the meetings, and putting them up for the public. Anyone who served with me, either in village or town, will tell you I'm not a big high tech guy, but I have always been a proponent that we televise in a closed circuit or whatever might work, but televise, record our meetings. Too many folks, for their own reasons, child care or infirmed or elderly, can't get out to these meetings, but should be as close to real time as possible for hearing and maybe seeing what goes on in their public work. So sometimes it's hard to say if you build it, they will come. I'm not sure if the library, the larger room, isn't part of the reason more people come. By moving over to the larger meeting room, yeah, there are controversies that have brought people around, etc. But I think just people feeling comfortable instead of crowded in behind the judge's bench and so on, in the small utilitarian room that is the town hall, to the larger space. I think it's just more inviting. I think it gives folks a chance to sit, be comfortable, and watch the process, which sometimes can be just horribly slow and boring, but other times can be some stimulating conversation that they get a chance to participate in. All for the use of what is one of our great town assets, the library.
I remember the first time I tried recording in the Lake Pleasant building. I had to try and kind of duck out of the way. For those who don't know, I'm 6'2", 6 foot sitting, and I blocked many of the members of the board because I was right next to the table recording. So I had to duck down and try to do my work.
I remember that.
Duck down like that. Now, one of the things I already did an interview with Betsy Bain, who is running for town supervisor, is how can we improve business quality and quantity here in Lake Pleasant? Now, for those who don't know, you were the former owner of the Inn at Speculator and currently run a salad dressing.
Yeah, sauce and marinade salad dressing business. It's a part-time endeavor for me. I am enjoying a retirement piece here. I must say, this summer, being the first summer not working 70 hours a week, has been delightful. More time as Grandpa Mac, more time to reintroduce myself to some friends and family and my golf clubs. That said, in my time in public work, both as a trustee, mayor, supervisor, but even before that, as a young businessman, very active member in our chamber. In fact, longtime president of our chamber. I've been really involved in the business climate issues of the town of Lake Pleasant, and in fact Hamilton County. When I was on the County Board of Supervisors, for 6 years, I was the chairman of the Tourism and Economic Development Committee, and glad to serve in that capacity because it was something I felt I had, a handle on. So I'm not going to say that I have any magic bullets for just right away increasing businesses, stopping any from having hard times or closing. Because if I had those facile answers, I would have already done that. It is a constant effort. I don't think you can do anything but be vigilant. And the first order of that vigilance is to constantly send the right messages to small businesses. We're not, because of constraints of ours, some of which we relish, being far away from folks and being in the park, smokestacks and so on, not being part of our landscape. But those challenges pretty well preclude Neil McGovern as chairman of the Economic Development, or anyone else, from enticing Bombardier or GM or anybody else to come into our town, county, or park to create jobs. Small business is the driving engine for Lake Pleasant, for Speculator, and the county. So how do you do that? Well, I think you do that by, again, sending the right messages. Let's go back for a second on streetlights. Terrible message to be cutting a service so vital. Maybe even as big a deal as the safety is the message. But you go forward with that, and it's I certainly go arm in arm with every person in local government who's trying to keep taxes at a minimum. But you know what? In the scope of things, my regional, statewide travels with local government tell me that we are not anywhere near the high levels of taxation of other municipalities, and we have a lot of challenges that do create an illusion of more municipal public sector jobs than the average. Well, of course, when you break it down and you talk about teachers, snowplow, or the third largest county in the state, much bigger than Rhode Island, but we only have 5,000 residents. But we still have to keep every road safe, plowed, sanded. We still have to take care of those roads in the warmer construction months. So when you break it down, you're like, wow, look at how many public sector jobs we have as opposed to private. Well, I'm a private sector guy, and my idea is to get more private sector work. But let's not kid ourselves. When you count everything that is publicly paid for in a county such as this, it will require that we're skewed in our percentage. I'm fine with that, but we can't just throw our hands up either. We need to make more opportunity for young people, be it your age group and younger, in fact, to stay or come back after school, college, to our community. I don't understand when folks retreat from, and in many cases bristle, about growth. Gary, when I moved here in 1979, 40 years ago, we were the least populated county east of the Mississippi. In that time, it was just about the number of a mile, 5,280 residents in this enormous county. Well, it was eye-popping to me that we would have so few, only to see over the past 3 census that have followed, we now have lost over 10% of that amount. So all of the indicators of the old famous Bill Osborne's treatise on the canary in the mine shaft, we are listening to the warning bells going off. Where are the people going to come from to ride on the back of our fire trucks, to volunteer for our ambulance corps, to be in our civic groups? We have to stem this loss. It is, at this point, even for small numbers, we're hemorrhaging folks. We have a couple of new businesses that are very encouraging that have just recently popped up in our area. However, we have 2 historic landmark businesses, that one in Zeisers, which is the natural order of things. Mrs. Zeiser has passed, but the building, the space, taking up such an important spot on our Main Street, sits empty, and no plan has even been spoken to. But even Melody Lodge, which been closed for a while, we're encouraged that a local business that the community's gotten behind in Oak Mountain has now some plans to get that going. But when a place like that sits and people think, oh, this is a very lucrative business, and yet doesn't sell, including my own, it took a really tough slog to find the right person who could take over a three-generation family business and keep the staff, not cost the community jobs, and go forward. In fact, without so much as a closed day. That's hard work. It's intended to happen that way. And if we don't make, I think, some new civic groups perhaps, to make the climate enticing, we've got lots to sell here, lots to sell. But we can't let small groups who have their own agendas push for, oh no, we don't need any more of that. We don't need any more of that. Or, gosh, we don't want to become another Lake George. There has not been one single hotel accommodation built in Hamilton County since 1956, which, by the way, was the year I was born. If you want to talk about tourism stock and investment in the same, we have to be able to get hotel companies to come in Long Lake, in Indian Lake, in Arietta, in Lake Pleasant. So, yeah, we have to send the messages that we are, in fact, open for business.
Yeah, that is a something I've discussed a few times in these interviews. Is when my mom passed away. We had her funeral, and most of my family's from New Jersey, and they come all the way from New Jersey, 3-4 hour drive up to the funeral, and there was no place to stay. Most of the places were full with snowmobilers or like Water's Water's Edge. I think.
Water's Edge, sure.
Yes, has a week. Like they had a week policy. You have to buy a week for you to stay there. And Camp of the Woods has a very similar policy. You need to stay at least a week to use their.
And not to interrupt you, but Camp of the Woods also has a certain secular, non-secular sort of litmus test too. They don't want to be seen as some open Hilton. They're looking to promulgate their mission. They are not truly a private sector hotel.
Right. But just the fact that we had to tell these people, and many who are elderly that drove 4 to 5 hours to be at this funeral, stay for the funeral for 2 hours or so, and then have to make them drive all the way back, or have to go to Johnstown to get a hotel.
Sure.
In a tourist town, to me, is baffling.
Well, you know, and in my last 10 years or so of public service, I would start to redirect the conversation when people would say that we live in a tourist community, tourist town. And I said, no, we live in a second homeowner economy here. Tourism requires certain things, and lodging is the first thing. So it may seem like splitting hairs for a person who rented rooms and catered events and ran a restaurant and tavern, but all our customers were valued. Certainly our second homeowner customers were as well. But we got out of kilter in the time that I have lived here. A tourism town at this point, the only way you can make that case is by saying that Moffett Beach is the largest state campsite inside the Blue Line. So we get campers, Indian Lake Islands and Louis Lake and Moffett Beach and outside the town, but in our region, the Pasico campsites, etc. Beyond that, for those, in your case, family reunions, funerals, weddings, all manner of large events, things that we want to absolutely specialize in, absolutely encourage people to come and see what we've got to offer here in our great outdoors. You still have a big proportion of people who are on the road each day who want to sleep on a bed and have a hot shower. And they can be accommodations from the simplest bungalows to a modern hotel. That said, we don't have any of those being built. And that's, again, it's not a small matter, because if you're in the economic development world that I was, the people just look at you and they say, look, we can't get to first base here with you. You can't sleep in one place, a bus, not a slew of buses or a large event. No 40-person bus bringing adults or children through our region can do anything but stop, use up public restroom facilities, perhaps buy an ice cream or a sandwich through the town, and move on to what they see as, unfortunately, greener pastures. It is a glaring, long-standing problem. We can't continue to be so proud of our heritage of these fine 4-story, beautiful wood frame Adirondack hotels of our past, and be so afraid to build one completely safe concrete and steel structure that will bring that bus.
Now, you mentioned that you were the president of the Chamber of Commerce.
Chamber of Commerce.
Chamber
Yeah.
of Commerce, and they, among other businesses such as Oak Mountain and the Historical Society, have brought about events such as Oktoberfest, the Craft Fair, the Beer and Wine Festival, etc. And they have been very successful, not just for them, but for the businesses. You bring people in, they go get lunch, as you had mentioned.
Sure.
And it's been, as I have talked to business members, they've been very full when these events happen. So they've been very successful. What can the town board do to help create more events and allow the ones that we have already to exist and to flourish?
Well, we have a very unique, just alluding back to the chamber, we have a very unique situation here vis-a-vis tourism and our businesses. There's nothing like it, even within county. We are an amalgam of both public money and private business that funds that office that you know to be manned every day up at our Chamber of Commerce. Who, by the way, Donna Bankovich and Bonnie Reisinger, both working very hard for some new events. You mentioned the Bear and Wine Fest, a solid success, eye-popping numbers, well over 700 visitors into the pavilion in that first try. But other things, the Apple Fest, the private sector kicks in with Oktoberfest. Plenty of new things, but in the last, say, 5 years or so, that have really started to take hold. I say it's unique because what the Chamber of Commerce does, which is more or less an old-fashioned model of chambers, are a board of director driven group of businesses that work to make the climate for economy grow. However, we don't have that many businesses, and the fees to be in the chamber are quite low. By that I mean $150, and some of them for very, very small businesses as much as $75. That would not drive paid employees with benefits and heat and light and so on by itself. So we put together many years ago, I was proud to be part of that, when Sarah Osborne was our chamber director. We put together a sort of a contractor model where the towns around us, rather than have, say, a post of office of a tourism director in the town payroll, Gary might be just for Lake Pleasant and Joe might be for Arietta and so on, we decided to have some strength in numbers, and each of these towns would pay a fee to the chamber under the auspices of Office of Tourism, and they would represent our communities. And in those days it was Arietta, Morehouse, Lake Pleasant, and Town of Wells. Originally the village was in that too, but we eventually folded in all of that to the town's budget, seeing as how the village people were sort of paying twice for some of these contributions. And it has worked to some success by promoting these communities. Wells has dropped out and come back in and dropped out, so not contributing anything to that cause. But the town of Lake Pleasant has always been the largest contributor, contractor, if you will, to keep that office moving forward. So they already do something. And in my time in office, we increased that amount moderately. Now, I wouldn't say substantially, because my mantra was maybe a few of these other communities could pay more as well. Costs go up, and you as a contracted fee service, it's up to the town board to make sure that the chamber monies are spent well for the overall health. And it isn't just tourism, it's the economic well-being of the community. We could always have an office building. We could, not everything would be tourism driven. That said, with so few understaff and a dwindling amount of volunteers for our chamber to host things in and out of the town. I mean, the Psycho Triathlon, and there are other things that, were not based solely in the town of Lake Pleasant, but many of them are. And they're run sometimes with private donation. The Lane run, the 10K run, a 5K run, has been something paid for through the Lane family. But the chamber finds those volunteers and gets all the other the moving parts put together. In my last term as supervisor, I decided to speak to the chamber about this. I didn't want them to think that this was going to be in any way conflicting with their role, but we came up with something region-wide that I thought had great opportunity, great possibilities that we were not able to bring forward. It was called SPARC, S-P-A-R-C, Speculative Paseco Area Regional Council. And I wanted to tap into both our very, very talented retirees, our well-intended folks that we had had such great luck with when my time on the village board, my village board did what I think was a brave and historic move in saving Oak Mountain. We hoped, and we had no model to go after, I hoped that the community writ large would get behind this to get both skiing for our kids and 40 jobs that were on the chopping block, that we would save them. And boy, they came out in droves in financial and physical work, labor. It was remarkable. A barn raising that I have never seen so successful before. So with that, and eventually those people gave their time, and the thing processed from being a village-owned property managed under a bankruptcy court to a private sector thing. That how many times in your interviews do you bring up Oak in so many different ways? They are a true success story. So those volunteers sort of drifted back to their lives. We were hoping with Spark that in and outside of the town that we could bring these folks back together. Not on an everyday thing, not chopping wood or mowing down ski hills, but people who could help make these events happen. And just maybe you only volunteer for one each year, but we sign you up through Spark. So we are both a feeder group, if you will, for the Chamber of Commerce, and fill in some blanks that are truly not there, that are not being filled by mentoring, by having someone who's run a very successful business in wherever, Sullivan County, Rockland County, Long Island, help you get a similar sort of endeavor going here in the town of Lake Pleasant in our region. I have great hopes that if I can get back on the town board, if the town board is of a constitution that they can look to Spark to be a Spark, this will be the answer for some of the questions that we have about what makes this community thrive and go forward.
I know something like that would have really helped many people who've tried to make events that are, you'd think that they're easy in concept, and then when you get to the nitty gritty stuff, the insurances, the volunteers and things like that, it would have been nice to have people who have put on events even if they weren't directly involved, at least give their experience and
Sure.
telling you, okay, this is what you're going to need to do. This is what I've run into trying to do these things. Because sometimes, you have the idea, then you run into those daunting red tape,
The wall.
technical, yeah, the wall, and then you're just like, nope, done.
Right.
I'm out.
Right. It's much, much easier to not do something than to do something. Um, I have found in my time that the naysayers have a louder voice. Um, that can't be done. Here's why. Now, I'm a practical man, and I have thought of things that I chose to not do because when you make that list of pros and cons and daunting things, they were too. Oh, okay. There's too many pitfalls here. But equally, in my time, I have never seen anything that could not be surmounted with the proper amount of volunteers and energy. So we either continue to find reasons to not have a hotel, continue to find reasons to not have a non-polluting factory in our midst, continue to find reasons why we're woe is me, wring our hands, or we pull together, as few as we are, and we make these things happen. It's a very trite expression, that sort of silent majority. But there are more people out there that have hope for our community. There are more people out there that don't like the negativism. They're just not vocal every day. You don't see them walking around in front of Charlie John's with placards. But if we show leadership on our town boards, on our county boards, on our village boards, the folks who are like-minded will come out.
All right. So, as we had stated before, there are 2 open spots on the town board. We know there are 3 people running. There's you, Don Bronius, and then I forget Miss Swanson.
Jim Swanson.
Jim Swanson. And then like any combination of the 3 of you
Sure.
will get on the board. Do you expect a smooth transition with the other town board member and possibly a new town supervisor?
Sure.
If you were elected?
I do. I have run for office at least 10 times. I'm happy to say the only ones that I lost was my first one. When at 30 years old I ran for mayor at the urging of others and way in over my head. And my last one, which I was, I guess, sad about, but it coincided with my wife's deathly illness and her demise. So looking back, I think that the Lord sort of paved the way for me to step back from public life. But having been in these situations where we had some contentious trustee elections many years ago, certainly for mayor, it was not, completely, obviously if it was completely harmonious, maybe you don't run against Joe or Harry or Mary. But in all these cases, I have found working with people, putting aside petty differences, we've come to some really good things. My own experience, the person that I say I ran against when I was very young and was urged by others was Cully Smith. Not a year after Cully beat me for mayor, he reached out to me and asked me to be on the planning board. I went to school, I learned what that was, and I got on the planning board. That sort of shot me into a trustee race, which after being a trustee on Cully's board, we worked together on huge things, multi-million-dollar water systems, sewer upgrades, huge projects. Years later, when I was mayor and Cully was off the board, I reached out to him and asked him to sit on an open seat that came open because my trustee spot came open. And we worked together on many things, not to mention the Oak Mountain reclamation. Conversely, when I left the mayor's job to run against Frank Mazzano, it was a very hotly contested election. I won by a small margin. I was the one who went to bat at county to please keep Frank in the position that he was in as budget officer at county, and we worked together almost every week during that period. When Frank ran most recently 2 years ago for a supervisor, I was a staunch supporter. So I think that small differences become even smaller when you start to earnestly work with people towards the better good. And I feel the same way about Betsy. Should she win, I think she would try to get some good direction from Danny for any of the things that they could see eye to eye on. For me, if I were to win, I could certainly get along with and work towards a better town board with either Jim or Don. So it's really a small matter to me. And I'll tell you the truth. Both of these men are really fine men. Don has a very good institutional knowledge of how the back of the house works at the town. Jim, from what I'm told and what I've read, has a pretty good management background in his former professional life. Neither one of those fellows has any elected experience, and I think that gives me an edge towards doing a good job out of the box, directly out of the box. So, yes, whomever is supervisor and whomever are town council men, I look forward to working with.
Yeah, election time is always, to me, bittersweet because of how contentious it can be. And it's just the nature of competition. You're competing with someone else, and it gets hot. You see it in sports all
Sure.
the time. Two teams get heated
Right.
and say things. And especially in a town like ours, where we've kind of talked about that we get we get along, even if we don't like to. If something happens, we get together and we work.
We always hope that's the case, and I've never seen it not to be when the chips are truly down.
When you always hope that's the case afterwards, when when the competition is over, that okay, whoever won, whoever lost, and then we can
That's
come together and remember that the true meaning of these elections is to make a better town.
Better town. That is exactly right, Gary. And I can't stress enough that most of this sort of contentious, competitive things that go on in elections are both expected and part of the process. I can't help but say I'm disappointed, once again, that this process, with so many seats open, this process has not included a public forum. 3 nights ago, in Indian Lake, they had a well-attended public forum for the county positions that were up, the DA, the county judge, but also their Indian Lake positions in the Indian Lake Theater. It was a spirited exchange, and one that I truly have wanted to be a regular piece of our elections here. I can remember being in both the old school and the new school where several hundred people came out for these sort of things. Yeah, they may include some of the hotly contested things, be it right now it's the right-of-way and its uses over on Golf Course Road. But there's always something that most of us, the street lighting issue, most of us are not completely informed on. And rather than hear it in small bits on Facebook or massaged, to use the word, sound bites out there, or too much coffee talk chatter, why not have these things more regularly? That and some of the negative personal things in our elections, I think we have to work to take out of the equation.
Yeah. Town hall meetings have been something that have become very popular across the country and even on radios and stuff like that.
Sure.
And that's one thing I've always enjoyed. I've worked the Republican picnic with you and with other companies, or attended it myself. is when they give each person there has like 5 to 10 minutes to do their spiel, and you're allowed to walk up, say hi, my name is, ask, talk to them, ask a few questions,
It's a true meet and greet.
a true meet and greet.
Yeah.
And
Now that again, that's hosted by one party.
Mhm.
That isn't even the fullest of airings. It's not like a town hall meeting or a sort of a Vermont town hall meeting thing that you started with. We have so many Democrats and so many independents currently that are in our community who don't necessarily feel comfortable going to a Republican picnic. So why not put it in a public forum? The school is a perfect one. Why not take a reasonable arbiter to be the moderator and invite any and all people who are currently in office or running for that office to sit a dais and answer some questions? Nothing that's looking to be combative. This is information. The old-fashioned Vermont town meeting that might be only twice a year, but the whole town would come out and say, oh, geez, there'll be some cookies and some this and that, and maybe you can donate a couple of bucks to the Twigs or whoever put them out. But in the meantime, you get to have that moment where you ask your elected leaders, let's face it, after we vote, and I think that's the bare minimum for what people should do for their civic duty, but after folks vote, an awful lot of people leave the tiller, leave the direction of that boat to their elected boards. They're just, we're all the same. I'm an innkeeper, you run a small mill, but these are the folks who are on your board. School teacher at the school. We don't want professional politicians. We want people with leadership qualities who listen to the folks. Well, you got to once in a while press flesh with those elected people. Make sure they're doing what they've been asked to do, show up, be at their office, do the work of the people. But also, if they're kind of going off the wrong direction, you get to kind of gripe at them a little bit.
I'll have to make the Declan Radio Presents debate night.
Well, honestly, in all kidding aside, you are in a very small market, perhaps, but you are the media for this area. Not to say Hamilton County News isn't, but the League of Women Voters sponsors some of these things. Sometimes the Chamber does, but sure, couldn't Declan Radio be the moderator?
That'd be kind of cool.
It would be.
And even if it weren't a debate, because I know some people aren't really into a debate format because it kind of puts the sometimes pressure on them, or they just don't do good in a debate setting. Right. That's why I kind of referred to, and not just specifically Republican, but the whole meet and greet.
Yes.
And the whole just stand up, you do your 5-minute spiel.
Well, that's why the town hall model from other states and other rural areas, I think, works. Rather than a debate where I cross swords with you directly. Gary, didn't you use the public's car to go to your, whatever? And that can be contentious, and many people are off put by it. The town hall meeting is, Gary, the next you're the moderator. And the next question goes to Mrs. Miller. She's got the mic. And the question could be directed to any one of those elected officials. But it's an exchange between the public and those people who are either looking for or sitting in the public seats. I think that, and you can keep the temperature down a little bit by just moderating it, right? Mm-hmm. So if the answer becomes too combative or the questions become too rapid fire and combative, we slow the roll a little bit. And how about a question for one of the other candidates, and so on and so on. And a good moderator could turn around and sort of say, okay, is there anything that the elected officials would think that they'd like to get a consensus from the folks in the audience? I've seen that where they said, how many of you folks would, by a show of hands? It kind of can redirect the discussion, because that's what these things need to be, is a discussion, not a shout fest.
All right. As I usually like to do at the end of these interviews, I'd like to give you the floor for your final thoughts on your platform or what we've discussed or anything like that. So the floor is yours, Mr.
Well, thank you, Gary, and I appreciate this opportunity. You do a fine job in trying to get the full message out from either candidates or issues to the folks, and I hope that more and more will tune into your casts and that they'll somehow become more regular discourse. In closing, I would simply say that the vigilance I spoke about before is what I will bring as a town councilman. You have to work at these things every day because there will be more swings and misses than hits or home runs. Right? We're right in the middle of the World Series, and anybody who's hitting 300 means that they did not do well 7 times out of 10. Right? And yet they are usually the heroes. So I say to you that I'm anxious to listen to our people, the people who actually do the work in our community day after day after day. Listen to our taxpayers, some of whom are seasonal. Listen to all of their concerns and distill it down to what I hope will be good council advice, votes among a board of 5 that will make our town a better place. There is many things that we need to start working better between our village and town, not the least of which we have one of the greatest assets in the park in an award-winning sewer treatment plant and an award-winning water distribution system, both of which are underutilized and, quite frankly, under source for revenue. So that marriage of extending sewer and particularly water to places needs to happen, and it's a really tough lift. And that's why it needs to start with discussions between these two boards, something that I always worked on from both sides of that street. Taxes are a vexing problem, and they come every year in the mail, and we all have to review them and work towards making them leaner. However, the real killer in our community right now are water rates. The water rates are so high that there are many businesses and business opportunities that may go by the boards because of the rate for that wonderful source, which is water. So again, that's an area that I really hope that I can help work with our village boards to some resolutions. The more services provided, we already have great roads, we already have Wi-Fi, we already have a cell tower, we're very blessed. But water and sewer brings economic development. That's what the next hotel, the next small factory, that's what they'll be looking for, and I think we need to provide it. That is jobs. So a lot of work to be done, and I'm more than willing to do the work for the people.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank everybody for listening. If you're listening on DACM Radio, thank you for tuning in. If you're listening on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, comment, all that fun YouTube stuff. I'd like to thank Neil McGovern once again for sitting down with me for this interview, and we hope to see you guys next time. Take care.